Assalamu alaikum guys, this is Dr. Fatima and now we are going to prepare another topic which is pulse oximetry. This is the episode 2. In episode 1 we discussed the introduction of pulse oximetry and very basic concepts about pulse oximetry and physics of pulse oximetry. In this very video we are going to do other things which are the clinical applications. So one of you who has not gone through the previous video, I will share the link of the previous video and you can find it there. So let's begin with the today's topic, and the goals of today's discussion will be applications of pulse oximetry, interpretation of the results which we get from pulse oximeter, and what are the sources of error and how can we troubleshoot them, and then we are going to just summarize the whole thing. Okay, starting with the applications. So by application, what I mean is that where I can apply a pulse oximeter and how I can utilize a pulse oximeter in hospital setting and out of hospital settings. In hospital setting, we can use it in the emergency room, in operation theater, in post anesthesia care unit, in intensive care unit, in cardiac units, as well as in the neonatal ICUs, in general wards, of course, and also with hospital while moving a patient from hospital to the other hospital, or while moving a patient for a procedure from one place in the hospital to another place within the hospital. This is a required component which we utilize all the time. Also on this part, I would like to describe on which parts of the body we can utilize the pulse oximeter. Mind it, as we already know that we need a surface from which the light can emit. So we need a medium. While in the babies, the nails are so small and the pulse oximeter size is really big. So we can utilize their palms, we can utilize their soles, as you can see in this picture. We can use in the adults, we can use the earlobes, and we can use pulse oximeter on the fingernail pad, which is the most common site. For example, if a patient has got peripheral cyanosis or peripheral arterial disease and we cannot detect the pulse on the fingernail, we can utilize the pulse oximeter on the earlobe within the adults. As well as in the last picture, we can see the portable or personal pulse oximeter, especially in the pandemic of coronavirus disease. This portable pulse oximeter became very famous in public. Everybody got it to just personalize it and utilize it in home and monitor their saturation. And once they got low saturations, and they visited the hospital. So this is a personalized pulse oximeter. Interpretation of the results. How can we interpret the results and what information we get from pulse oximeter? So in interpretation of the results, before doing that, we have to follow some rules. You are a clinician and you are dealing with the patient. You are treating the patient and not the chemistry of the patient only. So you should trust your clinical skills more than these devices. So pay attention to the trends, set target level of saturation according to the disease etiology, because every disease is different. For example, in an obstructive sleep apnea, you need a low SpO2 as compared to in the patient with a cardiac disease only. The other thing is that you have to know the limitations and errors from a device. Okay. And the other thing, we go for ABGs, which is the arterial blood gases. You should have a low threshold to go for an ABGs. Whenever you are suspecting an error from a saturation probe or a pulse oximeter, you should always go for an ABGs. Now, I want to know that what I need to interpret and how we need to interpret. How can I interpret results from pulse oximetry? What information I can get from pulse oximetry? So we can get three informations, and we have to utilize our knowledge about pulse oximetry via three ways: waveform analysis, correlation with the pulse PaO2 and SaO2, as well as optimal oxygen saturation in different patients according to different etiology. Okay, this is the waveform analysis. What happens in the monitors with the pulse oximeter? We don't get only a reading of pulse, heart rate, as well as the saturation, but also we get a waveform, and this waveform is basically having a diacritic notch, just like what you see in the invasive blood pressure monitoring. And then you get a then you get a synchronization with the palpable pulse. For example, if I have got a pulse oximeter and I place my hand on the pulse of the patient, I should the sound of the pulse oximeter should synchronize with the pulse which I am feeling. If there is some unsynchronization between the two, I should see that this pulse oximeter is not doing work properly. Okay, now we have got correlation with the SaO2 or PaO2. Mind this particular thing in mind, that pulse oximeter gives SpO2 and it does not give you any information about PaO2. Because why? Because SpO2 is basically the pulsatile oxygen saturation of the hemoglobin, which you get from the pulse oximeter, but you don't give the partial pressure of oxygen, which is dissolved amount of oxygen in the blood. Okay, you get PaO2 from an ABGs. Also, it is only an estimate of SaO2. You don't get an exact value of SaO2. How? If a patient has got a saturation of greater than or equal to 90% and higher, of course, the estimate of the SaO2 will be around 2 to 3%. For example, if I have placed a probe on my finger and I have a saturation of around 93, 94%, and at the same very moment I get my ABGs done, the SaO2 in the ABGs will be around 2 to 3% of what I got on the monitor. The other thing is that if on the pulse oximeter you get a value of a saturation which is less than 90%, especially which is less than 80%, the reliability of your data declines and you have definitely need to go for an ABGs. Now, what is optimal oxygen saturation in different settings? Well, there is no upper limit of the oxygen and there is no lower limit. We don't know at which lower limit that the tissue hypoxia occurs. So because it depends on many variables. For a normal adult, but what we know is that for a normal adult at resting SpO2, which is around less than equal to 95%, and on a strenuous exercise, if the SpO2 declines greater than 5%, this is abnormal and you have to go to the doctor. The other thing is that we have to go and check the trend of the saturation. We don't have to stick to one reading. For example, in the COPDs and for example in the trends, for example in the COPD, what happens is that the COPDs they don't need a hyperoxic saturation because they are on the hypoxic pulmonary drive, hypoxic respiratory drive. They maintain their saturation, they maintain their respiration and carbon dioxide levels when they have got the saturation around 88 to 92%. So in a COPD, you don't have to overzealously give the oxygen to the patient, and you are going to ruin the patient if you do this. Okay. The other thing is that there is no upper limit of the oxygen at which we see that hyperoxia occurs. No, we don't know this because the pulse oximeter does not tell us that. So you have to be very cautious, especially in the COPDs, especially in the patients with the obstructive sleep apnea, as well as in the neonates. You can harm them when you give the high amount of oxygen to those patients. Okay. One good clinician should always know what are the sources of error in any of the instrument he is utilizing. If you don't know what are the sources of errors, you cannot correct them, you cannot troubleshoot them. So we are going to discuss the errors and sources. Well, we know that sources of error are two. They can be related to the pulse oximeter itself, and they can also relate to the patient. Starting with the inadequate waveform. For example, if you see that there is an inadequate waveform, as one can only know the inadequate waveform when he knows the adequate waveform, which we have described in the previous slide. Okay, guys, if you have got bored, please take a rest because it's getting long. I'm just giving you a break. You can drink water or anything. Okay. Okay, now we have got inadequate waveform. What happens is that improper probe placement. Okay, if the probe is not properly placed on the nail bed or on the earlobe or anywhere on the body, of course the pulse oximeter is not going to give you a good waveform. Also, if you have got a patient with a NIBP on the same arm on which you have got a pulse oximeter on the finger, when you press the NIBP cuff, there is no perfusion of the hand at that very moment, and so your waveform is disrupted. Okay. Motion or noise artifact. The other thing which is which happens when we move the patient from one place to another place on the stretcher, on anything. So what happens is that he is moving, so his finger is moving, or his body part on which we have applied the pulse oximeter is moving as well with the patient, or in shivering, or in seizures, or when we have got a pressure on the sensor. So what we get a noisy or motion artifact. Hypoperfusion. In hypoperfusion, what happens that there is no peripheral or low peripheral arterial perfusion of the hands or the feet on which you apply the pulse oximeter. For example, in sepsis, in severe hypotension, when the systolic blood pressure is especially below 80 millimeters of mercury, or when a patient is vasoconstricted, or when there is a peripheral arterial disease. So in these very conditions also, due to hypoperfusion, there is no good waveform. Okay, so you should have an ABGs as well. Other thing is hypothermia. Of course, if the patient is hypothermic, he has got a vasoconstriction peripherally, he's again going to give you a bad waveform. These are the inadequate waveforms which you can see in this picture. If the patient has got low perfusion due to peripheral arterial disease, due to hypothermia, due to any reason, due to hypotension, you are going to get a wave, but which is not having a good amplitude, which does not have a dichrotic notch. Okay, you just get a wave. And also, not only inadequate waveforms, you are also not going to get the proper values of SpO2 as well as heart rate. Okay, other thing is noisy artifact. If the patient is moving, and the motion artifact, if the patient abruptly moved, you got a good waveform previously, but the waveform just abruptly disrupts when the patient moves. Okay, falsely normal or high readings. What is this? What does I mean to say? I mean to say that there are some certain conditions in which you get a falsely normal or falsely high reading, despite that the patient has got low SaO2. So what are these conditions? These are carboxyhemoglobinemia, in which when does it happen? It happens in carbon monoxide poisoning, or in the patients who are chronic heavy smokers. Okay, why does it happen? It happens, guys, because carboxyhemoglobin and oxyhemoglobin, they are just the sisters, because they, absorb the light at the same wavelength, which is 660 nanometer. Okay, so the pulse oximeter doesn't know that 660 nanometer wavelength is being absorbed by oxyhemoglobin or carboxyhemoglobin. Okay, so it is just going to give you the same reading, like for example 98 or 99 or 100% even, but the patient is having low perfusion. The patient can get cyanosed even. Okay, so you have to see that the PaO2 will be normal, but the patient has got low SaO2. Why? Because of low hemoglobin saturation with the oxygen, not hemoglobin saturation with the carboxyhemoglobin. Okay, so carbon monoxide binds with the hemoglobin more than oxyhemoglobin, and because it absorbs the light on the same wavelength, you can get a high reading, faulty high reading, when the patient is actually hypoxic. The other thing is we see is in the diabetic patients, in the uncontrolled diabetics, in which HbA1c is greater than 7. Okay, and this also overestimates the normal SaO2. The other two things are methemoglobinemia and self-hemoglobinemia. And what are these two things? We are going to discuss these two things in the detail in the next few slides. As we mentioned the falsely high or normal readings, now we have also to mention falsely low readings. I mentioned methemoglobin and self-hemoglobin in falsely high or normal readings, and now I am mentioning them in here as well. I will tell you why in the next slides. Other things are sickle hemoglobin, inherited forms of the abnormal hemoglobin, anemia, skin pigmentation, venous congestion, or nail polish, especially blue, black, or purple colors. And the other thing is vital dyes. These are all the things which are going to give you a false low reading. Now, the detail of methemoglobin. What is methemoglobin? As we know that the normal hemoglobin has got one iron, and that is in the ionic form with a valency of +2. In methemoglobin, that iron is oxidized to valency of +3. Okay, and this methemoglobin, it absorbs both the wavelengths, I mean at 660 as well as at 940 nanometers. So the pulse oximeter doesn't know that what the hell is happening with me. So what happens is that methemoglobinemia should be suspected in those patients in which there is cyanosis and we have got a normal PaO2. Routine pulse oximetry cannot detect methemoglobin. This is a good limitation of pulse oximetry. You have to go for other oximetry or other things for detection of methemoglobinemia. The reason is that methemoglobin absorbs light at the pulse oximeter's two wavelengths, and this leads to an error in estimating the percentages of reduced as well as oxyhemoglobins. A high concentration of the methemoglobin causes the oxygen saturation to display as approximately 85%. So when you have got an 85% of saturation on the pulse oximeter and you have got peripheral cyanosis as well as the central cyanosis, and the patient is deteriorating, you should suspect methemoglobin. You go get an ABGs, you get a normal PaO2, you should have a high suspicion of methemoglobin. Now we have got self hemoglobin. Self hemoglobin is basically that it absorbs the oxygen saturation. It absorbs the wavelength at 660 nanometer, just like oxyhemoglobin, but it does not absorb it as 940 nanometers. So what happens is that patients present in the similar fashion as methemoglobinemia, I mean cyanosis as well as normal PaO2, but the different thing from methemoglobin in self hemoglobin is that it is transient thing, as well as it shifts the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve towards right, I mean towards unloading of the oxygen to the tissue. So what happens is that we don't get that much cyanosis and that much drastic changes in the patients with self hemoglobin as compared to in the patients with the methemoglobin. So high levels can falsely reduce the SpO2 and again trending them towards the 85% value. Similar to the methemoglobin, however, multi-wavelength co-oximetry does not accurately distinguish it from the methemoglobin as well. So it is again we have to go for another test as well for detection of and for difference between methemoglobin and self-hemoglobin by co-oximetry. Troubleshooting. We have discussed the errors. Now we have to troubleshoot them. I have divided it into three parts: inadequate waveform, and when we have got an inadequate waveform, we have got reasons. We know why inadequate waveform is there. It can be due to malposition. If it is due to malposition or motion artifacts, you have to reposition the probe and position the probe on the alternate side. If the patient is hypoperfused, you have to again reposition the probe or on the alternate side, and you can also warn the patient to use that pulse oximeter on the same side. If the patient is hypothermic, you should apply the probe to the earlobe or to the forehead. Just switch to the forehead probe because that will be warm as compared to the periphery, and also warm the peripheries. Skin pigmentation is having a low role, but if you have got a suspicion in a darkly skinned patient, you should have a low threshold for NABGs. Falsely normal or elevated readings. What are the problems and errors? We know carboxyhemoglobin, we know high HbA1c, we know methemoglobin, self-hemoglobin, and ambient light. Carboxyhemoglobin, that is the reason you should go for a co-oximetry. If you suspect a patient, if you know a patient is diabetic and he has got a high HbA1c, you should always go for an ABGs. If the patient is having methemoglobinemia, you think it is a methemoglobinemia picture, you should go for a multi-wavelength co-oximetry and you will find an answer. But if you are suspecting methemoglobinemia versus self-hemoglobinemia, you should also go for a biochemical analysis of self-hemoglobin, which will distinguish between the methemoglobin as well as self-hemoglobin. If there is an ambient light which is malinterpreting your results, just remove that ambient light source. Now we have got falsely low readings, and they can be due to inadequate waveform. We have discussed the problems. If we have got sickle hemoglobinemia, what we do is that we measure the sickle cell hemoglobin and the other abnormal hemoglobin levels. Methemoglobin, self-hemoglobin, we have discussed them in detail. And severe anemia hai, so we have to go for an ABGs, and as well as of course CBC with the hematocrit. Then we have got venous pulsations or congestion. We have to loosen up the probe, we have to reposition and go get an ABGs. If you have got a nail polish, you should remove the nail polish or change the site. Vital dyes can also do it, and you should but this effect is usually transient, so you should get an ABGs and confirm the problem and SaO2. ambient light है तो just remove it and get the true ABGs, get the true SPO. Now this is only the summary of the whole discussion. Okay guys, what is pulse oximetry? We know that it's a surrogate of, it gives you a SpO2 value, which is a surrogate of SaO2 in your blood. You don't have to go for an ABGs now every now and then when you have got a pulse oximeter. Okay, now we have got a what is this? This is using the spectrophotometry to determine the proportion of the hemoglobin that is saturated with the hemoglobin which is not saturated in the peripheral arterial blood. It is very good in that it is a rapid tool, it is non-invasive tool. You don't have to go get an ABGs every now and then. And now also, however, it cannot detect the hyperoxemia. Of course, this is a limitation. Pulse oximetry is indicated in any setting where hypoxemia may occur. I have told you in the applications and the areas of the hospital where you can apply it, where the clinical situations in which you can apply it. Clinicians should be pay attention to the trends on the oximetry. Also, they should have they should target the levels of oxygen according to the specific etiology of the disease. Okay, now we have that be aware of the limitations and errors of the pulse oximetry, and a low threshold to obtain the arterial blood gases, and a high index of suspicion. Whenever you have got a patient with a erroneous reading, you should have a high index of suspicion. This is a take home message, and you should have a low threshold of ABGs. Thank you very much. Thank you very much again. If you really understand anything from this video, please like, subscribe and share this topic to your friends. And next topic will probably be about non-invasive blood pressure monitoring and then invasive blood pressure monitoring. Let's hope how we do that. And thank you so much, and please give me your feedback in the comments section below. Thank you. Bye bye.